My name is Naomi, and I'm 28 years old. My entire life, I have been cast as the fragile one in my family, the sensitive, artistic soul in a household that worshipped the cold, hard science of success. My older sister, Dr. Katrina Vance, is a celebrated surgeon, and her achievements were the sun my parents orbited. So, when I was diagnosed with a rare, aggressive autoimmune disease, I shouldn't have been surprised when Katrina took one look at my file and declared it a textbook case of hypochondria. My family, trusting their golden child, cut me off completely, refusing to help with the life-saving treatment I couldn't afford. They left me to fight for my life alone. What they didn't know was that our late great-uncle, the family black sheep, had left me a box of old memories, and inside that box was a secret about my perfect sister's past. A secret so devastating, it would not only fund my treatment, but bring her entire carefully constructed world crashing down around her. If you have ever been told your pain wasn't real, or had your reality denied by those who should have supported you, drop a comment letting me know where you are watching from. Hit that like button and subscribe for more true stories about finding your strength when the world tries to convince you that you have none. Before my diagnosis, my world was a quiet symphony of earth and art. I was a ceramicist, and my small studio, attached to a rented cottage at the edge of town, was my sanctuary. It smelled of wet clay, damp moss from the nearby woods, and the faint, sweet scent of glazing chemicals. My hands, perpetually stained with terracotta and cobalt, were happiest when shaping formless lumps of clay into something beautiful and useful. My life was small, tactile, and real. I had a loving boyfriend, Leo, a landscape architect who understood the language of growing things, and a small but fiercely loyal group of friends. I wasn't wealthy or famous, but I was content. My family, the Vances, lived in a world of polished surfaces and professional accolades. My father, Richard, was a retired chemistry professor, and my mother, Eleanor, sat on the boards of 3 different charities. They valued logic, data, and measurable success. I, with my muddy hands and unpredictable kiln firings, was a loving enigma to them. My sister, Katrina, however, was their masterpiece. At 34, she was a rising star in the field of cardiothoracic surgery. She was brilliant, disciplined, and possessed a confidence so absolute it left no room for doubt. She lived in a sterile, minimalist condo that looked like a page from a design magazine, and her life was a series of prestigious awards, published papers, and grueling on-call schedules. The dynamic was set in our childhood. When Katrina won the state science fair at 16, my parents had a banner made and hung it across the front of our house for a month. When I won a national award for a ceramic sculpture that same year, my mother said, "That's lovely, dear. Just be sure to put down some newspaper before you bring it inside." Katrina's path was a career. My art was a hobby. Her stress was the byproduct of genius. My struggles were evidence of emotional instability. They loved me, but they believed in her. The only person who ever seemed to see through the facade was my great-uncle Ben, my grandmother's brother. He was a retired journalist, a cynical, witty man who had seen too much of the world to be impressed by titles or accolades. He would visit once a year, smelling of old books and whiskey, and he would always ignore Katrina's recitations of her latest achievements to come straight to my corner of the room. "Still making beautiful things out of mud, kid?" he'd ask, a twinkle in his eye. "Good for you. It's an honest way to live." He saw me. It was a gift I didn't realize the value of until he was gone. The first symptoms were vague and easily dismissed. A deep, gnawing fatigue that sleep couldn't fix, a persistent low-grade fever, a strange, lace-like rash that would appear and disappear on my legs. For months, I told myself it was just stress, but when my joints began to swell and ache with a pain so intense it made it impossible to work the potter's wheel,
I knew something was seriously wrong. It took 6 months and a dozen specialists to get a diagnosis, a rare and aggressive form of systemic vasculitis. My immune system was attacking my own blood vessels. Without treatment, the doctor explained gently, the inflammation would eventually lead to organ failure. The prognosis was stark. There is a treatment, though. The rheumatologist, Dr. Anya Sharma, told me, her face kind but serious. It's a new biologic therapy. It's extremely effective, but it's also extremely expensive. Your insurance will cover a portion, but your out-of-pocket cost for the first year of infusions will be close to $100,000. $100,000. The number was so large, it was abstract. It might as well have been $1 million. I had a small savings account, enough to cover a few months of living expenses, but nothing close to that. My only real asset was a small family trust fund, set up by my grandfather, specifically for medical emergencies. Accessing it required the signature of both my parents and my sister. I left Dr. Sharma's office with a heavy heart, but a flicker of hope. This was a medical emergency. This was what the trust was for. Surely my family, especially my surgeon sister, would understand. I called a family meeting that night via video chat. I laid out the diagnosis, the prognosis, and the cost of the treatment, my voice clinical and calm as I read from Dr. Sharma's report. When I finished, I sent them the digital files of my medical records. The silence that followed was not the compassionate, concerned silence I had expected. It was cold and analytical. Katrina spoke first, her voice devoid of any warmth. "Naomi, I've reviewed the file, and frankly, this diagnosis seems dramatic. Vasculitis is notoriously difficult to diagnose. Many of your symptoms are subjective. Fatigue, pain, these are common complaints." "Katrina, a team of specialists at Mass General confirmed it. I saw the biopsies. I saw the inflammation markers." "And specialists can be wrong," she said with an air of professional superiority. "It's more likely a psychosomatic response to stress. You've always been prone to anxiety. This sounds to me like a textbook case of hypochondria." My father, the man of science, nodded in agreement on the screen. "Katrina has a point, Naomi. We must consider all possibilities before jumping to expensive conclusions. Perhaps you should seek a second opinion, a psychological one." The invalidation was so complete, so swift, it stole my breath. They weren't just questioning the cost, they were questioning my reality. They were questioning my sanity. "So you won't help me?" I whispered. "You won't sign the papers for the trust?" "We can't, in good conscience, authorize the release of $100,000 for a condition that may not even be real," my mother said, her voice laced with a pained, patronizing sympathy. "It would be irresponsible. We think the best course of action is for you to focus on managing your anxiety, dear. When you're calmer, these symptoms might just disappear." And with that, they ended the call. They had listened to my cry for help and diagnosed it as a cry for attention. My sister, the doctor, had used her professional authority not to help, but to invalidate, to erase my illness because it didn't fit with her neat, orderly view of the world. And my parents, her loyal disciples, had followed her lead without question. I sat in the dark of my studio, the silence ringing in my ears, and I knew I was utterly, terrifyingly alone. The weeks that followed were the darkest of my life. My illness progressed with alarming speed. The pain in my joints became a constant white-hot fire. My fatigue was so profound that some days I couldn't even get out of bed. I had to stop working, and my small savings began to evaporate as I paid for prescriptions to manage the symptoms, even without the cure. I tried to reason with my family. I sent them articles about vasculitis.
I forwarded a personal, detailed letter from Dr. Sharma explaining the severity of my condition. Her letter was returned with a single handwritten note from my mother on the envelope. "We are praying for your peace of mind." They were not just denying my illness, they were actively resisting the evidence of it. The true cruelty began when, out of desperation, I started a GoFundMe page. I wrote out my story, posted photos of my medical bills, and shared the link with my small circle of friends. The initial response was heartening. Friends and even strangers began to donate small, meaningful amounts. Then, the sabotage started. My cousin texted me a screenshot of a family-wide email sent by Katrina, a note regarding Naomi's illness, the subject line read. The email went on to explain with clinical detachment that I was suffering from a severe somatoform disorder and that my fundraising campaign was a manifestation of a psychological crisis. She urged the family not to enable my behavior by donating and instead to direct their concerns and prayers towards my mental health. The donations stopped. A few relatives even retracted their contributions. My aunt called, her voice dripping with pity. "Naomi, honey, I had no idea you were struggling so much. Your sister is so worried. Please let us know if you decide to check into a facility. We would be happy to help with that." Katrina had weaponized her medical degree against me, turning my plea for help into a spectacle of my supposed insanity. She had discredited me, isolated me, and was now, it seemed, content to watch me fade away. Leo was my only lifeline. He came over every day, bringing groceries, helping me with chores, and simply sitting with me when the pain was too much. "This is monstrous," he would say, his hands clenched in helpless anger. "There has to be something we can do." But we were powerless. They had the money, the authority, and the family narrative on their side. I was just the crazy, sick little sister. The call about Uncle Ben came in the middle of this nightmare. He had passed away peacefully in his sleep. He had no wife or children, and as his closest living relatives, my parents were named the executors of his small estate. A week later, my mother called me, her voice unusually gentle. "Naomi, darling, Uncle Ben's apartment needs to be cleared out. With your situation, you probably have more free time than the rest of us. Would you be a dear and handle it? There's not much of value, mostly just old books and papers. You can call a charity to take whatever is left." It was another casual dismissal, another task for the daughter with nothing better to do. But the thought of being in Ben's space, surrounded by the memories of the one person who had always seen me, felt like a small comfort. I agreed. His apartment was a dusty, cluttered two-bedroom, filled with the comforting smell of old paper. It was a time capsule of a life lived with intellectual curiosity. I spent 2 days sorting through his books, his records, his boxes of old newspaper clippings. As my mother had predicted, there was little of monetary value. But on the third day, in the back of his bedroom closet, I found it. A heavy, locked metal footlocker. Taped to the top was a faded envelope with my name on it. My hands trembled as I opened it. The note was brief, written in Ben's spidery hand. "For Naomi, if you ever need to remind the world that even saints have a history, the combination is your birthday." I fumbled with the lock, my heart pounding. The numbers clicked into place and the heavy lid opened with a groan. Inside, nestled among old photographs and reporters' notebooks, was a thin file folder. The label on it read simply, "K. Vance, Med School." I opened the folder and the world stopped. Inside were copies of what appeared to be exam papers, detailed notes, and a series of letters. They told a story not of brilliance and discipline, but of calculated academic fraud. The letters were from a former classmate of Katrina's, a man who had been paid handsomely to take her medical college admission test, MCAT, for her. The notes detailed a complex scheme involving a fake ID and a proctor who had been bribed.
The final document was a sworn, notarized affidavit from the classmate, dated 5 years ago, detailing the entire scheme. He had apparently come to Uncle Ben, a trusted journalist, to clear his conscience. My sister, the brilliant Dr. Katrina Vance, the foundation of her entire career, her professional authority, her very identity, it was all built on a lie. Uncle Ben hadn't left me money. He had left me a weapon of mass destruction, and I knew exactly how I was going to use it. The first thing I did was call Leo. I read him the contents of the file over the phone. He was silent for a long moment, and then he let out a low whistle. She didn't just cheat Naomi. She constructed her entire life on a fraudulent foundation, he said, his voice a mixture of awe and disgust. What are you going to do? I'm not sure yet, I said honestly, but for the first time in months, I feel like I have a choice. The next call was to a lawyer. Not a family lawyer, but a specialist in medical ethics and malpractice. I found a woman named Miranda Stone, who had a reputation for being a shark with a conscience. I laid out the whole story in her office, my diagnosis, my family's reaction, and the contents of Uncle Ben's file. She listened without interruption, her expression unreadable. When she finished, she leaned back in her chair. "This is an extraordinary situation," she said, her voice calm and measured. "We have 2 separate issues here. The first is your family's refusal to release trust funds for a legitimate medical need based on the unqualified medical opinion of a conflicted party, your sister. The second, and far more explosive issue, is the evidence of academic fraud. I don't want to destroy her," I said, the words surprising even myself. I want to live." "I understand," said Miranda, "and sometimes in order to live, you have to be willing to fight. Your sister and your parents have left you with no other option. They have cornered you. This evidence is your way out of that corner. We won't use it to destroy her, we will use it to save you." Her plan was simple, elegant, and utterly ruthless. We wouldn't go to the press. We wouldn't go to the medical board. Not yet. We would go straight to the source. We would treat this not as a family drama, but as a private, high-stakes negotiation. Miranda drafted a contract. It was a work of legal art. It outlined in excruciating detail the evidence we possessed regarding Katrina's academic fraud. It then laid out a series of non-negotiable terms. First, Katrina and my parents would immediately sign the necessary documents to release the full $100,000 from the family trust for my medical treatment. Second, she would anonymously donate an additional $150,000 to my GoFundMe campaign, providing me with the financial security to manage my illness long-term without working. Third, she would write a formal, family-wide retraction of her psychosomatic diagnosis, admitting that she had spoken outside her area of expertise and that my vasculitis was a serious, legitimate medical condition. In return for this, the evidence of her fraud would be placed in a secure vault to be destroyed upon her death, provided she and her parents never again interfered in my medical or personal life. If they violated the terms in any way, a copy of the evidence would be sent directly to the state medical board and the dean of her medical school. It was, in essence, a checkmate. I called the family meeting. I told them I was ready to discuss a final solution regarding my health crisis. They agreed to meet at my parents' house, their voices filled with the smug certainty of people who believe they have already won. They thought I was coming to surrender. They had no idea I was coming to deliver the terms of their own. I walked into my parents' living room, a place where I had always felt small and insignificant, and for the first time, I felt powerful. Leah was with me, a silent, supportive presence at my side. Katrina, my mother, and my father were arranged on the sofa, a tribunal ready to pass judgment. "Well, Naomi," my father began, his tone patronizing, "we're glad you've decided to be rational. We found a very reputable long-term care facility that specializes in psychosomatic disorders." "I'm not here to discuss my health," I interrupted, my voice clear and cold. "I'm here to discuss yours, Katrina." I placed a single copy of the contract on the coffee table in front of them. "I suggest you read this carefully." I watched as Katrina picked it up, a flicker of annoyance on her face. I saw her eyes scan the first paragraph, the one that mentioned the MCAT exam. I saw the color drain from her face. I saw her hand begin to tremble. I saw her look up at me, her perfect, confident world shattering in a single, silent moment. And in her eyes, for the first time, I saw fear. She finally knew what it felt like to have her entire future in someone else's hands. The silence in the room was a living thing, thick and suffocating. Katrina stared at the contract, her face a mask of chalky disbelief. My parents, sensing the shift in power but not understanding its source, looked from her to me, their expressions a mixture of confusion and dawning alarm. "What is this nonsense?" my father finally boomed, reaching for the papers. "Don't!" Katrina snapped, her voice sharp and brittle. She clutched the contract to her chest as if it were a venomous snake she was trying to contain. "It's a private matter, Dad, between me and Naomi." "Private?" my mother said, her voice trembling. "Naomi comes in here with a lawyer's document, looking like she's about to execute someone, and you call it a private matter?" "It is," Katrina insisted, her eyes locked on mine. In that gaze, I saw a silent, desperate plea. For years, I had been the one pleading with her, begging her to see me, to believe me. Now the roles were reversed. "What did you do?" my father demanded, as his voice rose and he stood up and loomed over his favored daughter. Katrina flinched, a gesture so uncharacteristic it stunned us all into silence. She had never been afraid of our father. She had always been his equal, his partner in the Vance family project of success. "I made a mistake," she whispered, the words barely audible. "A long time ago. She cheated on her MCATs," I said, my voice flat and devoid of emotion. I decided in that moment that the truth needed to be spoken out loud. The secrets had festered long enough. "She paid someone to take the test for her. Her entire medical career is built on a fraudulent foundation. Uncle Ben found out years ago. He kept the evidence, and he left it for me." My parents stared at me, then at their daughter, their faces a canvas of slowly dawning horror. The story was too monstrous, too out of character for their perfect child to be a lie. They knew instantly that it was true. "This is blackmail," my father said, but his voice lacked its usual force. The accusation was hollow. "No," I corrected him. "Blackmail is when you demand money. I am not demanding money. I am demanding the funds from my own medical trust that you have illegally withheld. I am demanding that my medical reality be acknowledged, and I am demanding that you repair the damage that you have done to my reputation and my ability to seek help. This isn't blackmail, Dad. This is restitution." I gestured to the contract still clutched in Katrina's hand. "You have 24 hours to sign it and transfer the funds. If you don't, a package containing all of Uncle Ben's evidence will be delivered to the state medical board, the board of the hospital where Katrina works, and the New York Times. The choice is yours." I stood up, Leo rising with me. "We're leaving now. You can have your lawyer contact Miranda Stone with your decision." As we walked to the door, my mother finally found her voice. "Naomi, wait." She pleaded, her voice breaking. "Don't do this to our family." I turned back to face her, my hand on the doorknob. "You are the ones who did this. You did this when you decided one daughter was a star and the other was a shadow. You did this when you chose a comfortable lie over a difficult truth. You did this when you left me to die. This isn't me destroying our family, Mom. This is me finally saving myself." We walked out, leaving them in the ruins of their own creation. The call from their lawyer came the next morning. They had agreed to all my terms. The money was transferred by noon. The family-wide email, with Katrina's humiliating retraction, went out that afternoon. I booked the first appointment for my treatment, a quiet sense of victory settling over me, a victory that tasted not of revenge, but of survival. The treatment was long and arduous, but it worked. The inflammation subsided, the pain receded, and the fatigue began to lift. With the cloud of illness and financial terror gone, I began to heal, both physically and emotionally. The family I had known was gone forever. My parents and I now have a relationship that is cordial but distant, based on a fragile truce. Katrina and I have not spoken since that day. I heard she took a leave of absence from the hospital, citing personal health issues. The silence between us is a chasm that may never be bridged. I used the remaining funds from the settlement to start a small foundation, the Ben Vance Grant, which provides financial aid to patients suffering from rare diseases who have been invalidated or abandoned by their families. It's a small legacy, but like my uncle, it stands for the truth. My life is quiet now. I have my studio, my art, and Leo. I have a small but strong community of friends who have become my chosen family. I have learned that the most important diagnosis is not the one a doctor gives you, but the one you give yourself. And I have diagnosed myself as a survivor. My worth is not determined by the belief of others. It is forged in the fire of my own resilience, shaped by my own hands, and glazed with the hard-won truth of my own reality. Have you ever had to fight to have your own truth recognized by your family? What did that experience teach you about strength and self-worth? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please hit like and subscribe for more stories about overcoming adversity. Remember, your voice and your reality matter, even if you are the only one who believes it. Thank you for listening.